Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Fun and Games Podcast. I'm Geoff Moonen.
And I'm Matt, a.k.a. Stormageddon.
And with the recent announcement of Google's Stadia, I actually didn't watch a video, so I don't know how to pronounce it. Their streaming box that will do games. It brings to mind the fact that this is not the first time, far from the first time, that gaming has made a push as a multimedia platform. I mean, current generation consoles certainly are no exception to that.
Well, yeah, I mean, most modern consoles, it's like expected. Like the fact that Netflix still isn't on the Switch, but Hulu is kind of mind-blowing.
Yeah.
Like, I would have never expected that to happen. But yeah, I mean, as early as, I guess, the PlayStation 2, they played DVDs, which was like the first step into that kind of multimedia. And I believe the Xbox played them as well, if I remember correctly.
I think so. I remember it being a big deal that the GameCube with its tiny CDs couldn't hold DVDs. And in fact, there was a Panasonic GameCube DVD player hybrid. I think it was called the iQ.
Oh, yeah. I vaguely remember that. But yeah, like multimedia has always kind of been a big part of gaming, but with the current devices, it's beyond that. I mean, PlayStation has their own kind of like TV network, and you can buy movies on the PlayStation. I don't own an Xbox One, but I assume it also is multimedia.
Oh, definitely.
And, and like I said, the Switch can, you can pull up Hulu and YouTube on the Switch. Like, it's not just about buying games anymore on these devices. They're considered portable TVs as well. And the fact that Google is jumping into this race, but they want to do that, but like be the Netflix of gaming, is concerning a little bit.
Yes, because Google hasn't always stuck by its products. They will start up a project and then abandon it.
Yeah, everyone remembers Google Plus, which is now, I believe, in the process of being shut down by the end of the month, as of when we're recording. Yeah, and then Allo, which like barely got off the ground before they jumped ship. The idea that Google follows through on a project is not really true. They don't. And the idea that they want to jump into gaming, if they create this expensive console that people buy stuff for, and then they abandon it, like it's going to create a sinkhole in gaming that could create another gaming drought like we haven't had since the 80s.
And I mean, honestly, there are signposts and ideas that we may be heading towards something like that in the next 10 years anyway.
Right.
With the way digital distribution, the sort of like rising upper class of the overworking of AAA titles, an expectation of what needs to come out and how many tens of hours will work people a day, a week to make it happen. It isn't exactly sustainable. And then having something like Google coming in and being like, well, we're starting up a new project and don't you all want this? I'm honestly worried.
Yeah. And let me ask you an honest question, Geoff, because I don't know that I've ever asked you. Do you need your gaming devices to also do other things? Do you use these other apps on your video game devices?
A little.
Okay.
Definitely our PS4 is what we use for Netflix and Hulu and Amazon TV and all of those. Definitely when folks are over and we want to watch a YouTube video, it's way easier to do that on the PS4 than on the phone. I've never really played Blu-ray discs on it, aside from the games themselves. If those things went away and I had to get like a Roku player, it would be slightly inconvenient, but I think I'd be okay with it. What about you?
So for me, I mean, yeah, for the longest time, my PS4 and then my 360 before that was a Netflix device. I love my PS4, and as we've said many times on the show, the exclusives that I have, I really love playing. I love the Uncharted trilogy. I love Spider-Man for PS4. But the reality is, I've always been a PC gamer as well, and when it comes to multi-platform, especially now with Steam and the looming threat of DRM, even though they could take it away, it still makes more sense for me to buy my games if I can on Steam or Origin, because then I'll still have access to them when whatever console generation they came out for dies. And for that, I kind of tend to stick to my PS4 for only exclusives or to watch streamable media. My spouse and I watch a lot of Netflix and Amazon and Hulu, and we do it on that. We could do it on the Switch too, at least for Hulu, but my Switch is usually undocked unless it needs to charge because I play it more portable than on the TV these days.
Yeah, that's fair.
I will say with the Switch, I'll sit and watch YouTube on the Switch because usually if I'm sitting to watch YouTube, it's because multiple creators have come out with something over the course of the week that I'm catching up on. So I'll just sit and chill with the Switch in my lap and watch YouTube videos.
Nice.
But otherwise, if I'm watching stuff on my own without my spouse, I have my headphones on and I'm sitting at my computer and I pull up whatever I need to there because then I can also multitask. Like if I'm watching an Amazon Prime show that I can kind of do other things and don't have to see but can listen, I'll do other things. But like you said, if I needed to buy a device to do that, I don't know. It would be an inconvenience and an annoyance. But also, I have a Samsung TV that is a smart TV. And before I got the PS4, we were using the smart TV for that stuff too, until somehow the data got wiped on it. And like I had to re-log in and download everything. So I was like, fuck it, I'll just use the PS4. It's easier.
Yeah, I already have that.
As a controller. But I don't know that I rely on it for that. Because again, a lot of the solo Amazon, Hulu, and Netflix watching that I do, which is where I watch most of my media or YouTube, I do it on the PC. It's just comfortable for me to do that when I'm doing a solo viewing. So I don't know that I would rely on it, but it's definitely something I use without really thinking about it.
Yeah, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I realize I do most of my me personally. My multimedia watching is done on a laptop or on like a tablet device. Just because if I'm watching something at home, I'm not someone who will sit still on the couch for a very long time unless I'm interacting. If I have to play a game, I will sit there and play it for however long. But it's, I'm watching the show. Well, I like multitasking, analog multitasking. I want to watch this while I'm washing the dishes. I want to watch this while I'm putting clothes away. So it will travel with me. So whether or not it's on my PS4 or an Xbox or the Stadia or whatever, doesn't matter much to me.
Yeah, I think that maybe, let's say, last console generation with the PS3, the Xbox 360, and the Wii U, that generation I was more likely to sit at a TV and do it. But as we have phones that can play this stuff and tablets that can play this stuff and almost any PC or laptop can run this stuff, I'm less likely to go to my gaming console for that because at the end of the day, I bought the PS4 to play games on. It's convenient that I can do the other things, but I never bought a PS4 to play Blu-rays. I now own Blu-rays because I have a PS4. It's the other way around.
Agreed.
And so what worries me about the Stadia, which is what we're sticking with as pronunciation, if it's wrong, too bad. With the Stadia, when it comes to streaming games, I worry about, like, it does sound really cool in its infancy. Like the idea that I could go to a YouTube clip of Cuphead and then click a link that takes me to play Cuphead. Like, that seems like a brilliant thing because, I watch a lot of Let's Plays and I watch a lot of video gamers who talk about games, from Ant Dude to the Completionist to Matt Pat to Peanut Butter Gamer and beyond. I listen to a lot of these folks and watch a lot of these folks talk about games, and if so, there were a way on the Stadia when one of them's talking about Pikmin 2 to just go play Pikmin 2 right away. That'd be really neat. But then speaking about Pikmin 2, which is in my head because Ant Dude just did a video on it, the idea that, well, what if Nintendo doesn't want you to do that? Which is a good probability because Nintendo is one of the companies who keeps its original IPs closest to the chest. They're starting to branch out now a bit and be more comfortable and support multimedia stuff, but they weren't always. And something like the new Spider-Man game, Sony's really protective of. Like, it's never going to be anywhere else. It's only on the PlayStation. Right. I'm worried about those games because we're not going to be able to play those on the Stadia, probably.
Yeah. It kind of becomes a matter of, is it all games? Probably not.
Yeah.
What are we going to have access to here that PC gaming isn't already doing somehow?
And also, what's the range? Because, like, if they have a library that they're creating that gives you access to old classic games or arcade games, like, that'd be really cool. But it's unlikely that I'll be able to click on a link to go to a Nintendo game from a YouTube video. I mean, maybe it will, but it doesn't seem likely.
Yeah. For the most part, to the limited research I admittedly have done on this console, I am not I'm not saying I'm an expert here. I've read a couple articles. I've looked into it a little. It almost seems as though it's trying to appeal to a market of people who don't already have a lot of gaming consoles.
Yeah.
Or, I mean, the idea of a gaming Netflix is great for, well, I don't want to drop $60 on every new game, but I want to play these games, so I have access to them. Cool. It is a service, but again, if they can't provide that fully, then it's going to feel like a weird, patchy experience, I think.
Well, yeah, and I mean, that said, when every, major company has taken a step forward into this world of creating video game consoles, we scoffed at a lot of them. When PlayStation first started, Sega and Nintendo were the giants, and everyone's like, PlayStation, Sony, what the hell do they know? What a stupid name for a system. Meanwhile, they have 4 iterations of this console and going strong.
Yeah.
Same with the Xbox. Everyone's like, what does Microsoft know from video games? They make shitty Windows. Like, what do they know? And meanwhile, they've been a mainstay. And so I don't doubt that if Google stays behind it, that the Stadia could be something that succeeds. But what worries me is right now pricing of games is already kind of in flux. The idea that we're still charging $60 for a digital version of a game that didn't need any physical materials made is questionable. But then you think about, well, maybe they were losing money previously and now they can finally actually make money selling them digitally, which is part of the argument.
Yeah, it is.
And it's also part of the reason why any multi-platform games that are on Steam, they partner with Steam to slash prices because they oversell at that point. And so they still make a profit because more people buy those games at a cheaper amount.
People who weren't going to buy them before are now buying them.
Well, right. The idea of the Steam sales, which we've talked about multiple times, I buy games that I might have never bought at full price, but for $10, $15, $20, even $30, I might buy these, AAA titles to play them because I'm still interested in them. I just can't buy a video game a week,
Yeah.
And even if I bought a video game a week, I still couldn't buy every video game that was coming out.
Far from it.
Right.
And that's not even getting into games you've missed in the interim.
Right. And so from that perspective, the Stadia sounds interesting. This idea that all of these games that I may never get to play, now I can play and talk about either on our show or just in general because I'll have access to them and I don't have to front the money for it. I still haven't played the new Devil May Cry because I really want it, but I also had to buy a new Switch controller because my Joy-Cons died. And I can't, gaming... my money for gaming is a limited resource at the moment, and that's just how it is.
For most of us, it is.
Right. I wish I had millions of dollars to just drop on gaming all the time, but we don't have a major publisher or news outlet backing us to talk about games.
Yeah, we're just some nerds that like this.
Although we're open to it, Vice or Gamenesia or, any of those sites. If you want to back funny games, we're all about it. We love certain POV, but if you're going to pay us, let's do it.
Well, we can figure something out. We'll talk.
Right, we'll talk. But in all seriousness, this idea that I could stream games that I can't get access to because I just don't have the money to drop on the game at the time, or I don't want to spend the money on a game I'm going to play once. Like, there's a new Dark Soulsian game that I can't even pronounce the name of. I think it's Sekiro?
Sekiro's Shadows Die Twice.
That one. Thank you, Geoff.
No worries. I'm excited about it, too.
It looks really good, but I also know that I own Dark Souls 1 and 2, and I've played them with friends multiplayer, but trying to play them by myself, I get a couple hours in and get frustrated and never want to touch it again. And I have a feeling that game's going to be the same, and so I don't want to drop $60 on it. but it's of course a huge hit on Twitch right now, and a ton of people are streaming it because, people, it's Schadenfreude. People like to watch other people lose at games.
And it's also a good way to learn about this new game before you buy it.
Right.
And like the top streamers, it is in their best interest to get new games as soon as possible and stream it while the iron's hot and people are interested in it within the first 12 hours of release, let alone the first week.
Right. And, the idea that, like, if also Stadia partners with Twitch and obviously YouTube, it will, to stream these games that you're streaming, like the idea that you can then broadcast what you're playing with ease is huge.
Well, I mean, the PS4 allows that.
Right. And the PS4 allows that. I'm not sure about the Xbox One, although I think so. And the Switch doesn't at this point. You can take video clips and photos and post them to the internet with ease, but that's about it. Streaming is the future of gaming. As much as people like to make fun of people who watch other people play games, the reality is that's gaming culture. If you grew up as a little or older brother, or if you grew up with friends who had a console, you took turns playing single player games and then watched people play games.
Yeah. You watch people play sports. You can go play those sports yourself. Why are you watching someone else do it, huh?
Exactly. And this idea that that's where the culture's headed. And like in reality, 90% of the stuff that I watch most regularly these days are YouTubers who talk about games, because that's
Same.
a passion that I have, with the odd one out being the Needle Drop and the Melon himself, talking about music. That's kind of the only other multimedia thing I watch on YouTube to hear about reviews and the modern culture. Otherwise, it's mostly gaming. And it's because I grew up in a culture that valued watching other people play stuff. I mean, I talked about this in, shameless plug, a recent burlesque show that I hosted about video games. I talked about how, I couldn't play horror games because they terrified me. Mm-hmm. But watching other people play them was better because we would be scared together. It was a communal experience.
Yeah.
And I think the Stadia has potential to build that kind of an audience.
Mm-hmm. And to be fair, the idea of streaming games or having this kind of access, this is not the first time this has happened. Not even the first. I'm thinking of like much older ideas of this. I mean, something like the Sega Channel back in the 90s was essentially this.
Yeah, that's true.
Where it was you paid a monthly fee, you had the cartridge, you could log in, and the library would rotate a little.
Yeah, I forgot about the Sega Channel. Yeah, that was awesome. I love the idea that you could play these Sega games that you couldn't buy. And I don't even remember, how much were Sega games back then?
I want to say Sega games were something like $30 or something. I'm trying to let me look that up. But it also was one of the only ways that American gamers were able to play some titles that never got imported. It was the only way in America you could play, say, the Mega Man game, the Wily Wars that came out for the Genesis.
Oh, that's right, because it was exclusive to the Sega Channel, I believe.
I think that it had like a European physical release or something, but yeah, it was like almost, certainly in America, it was exclusive to the Sega Channel. That's the one I can think of off the top of my head, but it was, yeah, it was essentially that sort of like, before there was Netflix, it was its own digital blockbuster.
Well, yeah, and then there was the idea of GameFly, which I think is still around, though I haven't used the service in ages. But like the idea that GameFly, you could rent games and they would ship them to you like Netflix did before they became primarily streaming. Although I do know people who get the discs. Like, I had assumed that GameFly would follow suit and eventually do streaming. But my understanding was it was too difficult for them to coordinate with all of the publishers and the developers and the console owners to allow that to work.
Right. There is a lot of go-between liaisoning and negotiations that have to go on with all of that. And it's tricky.
Yeah, I wonder, we're at a weird place in video gaming, I feel at least, because at least for me as a gamer, I used to be dedicated to one console. That was it. And then I had a computer. Like, that was kind of how it went for a long time. You were either a Sega kid or a Nintendo kid. Sometimes you had both. But now I find myself, I have two consoles, and it's usually a Nintendo console and whatever else, because Nintendo has still the largest number of exclusives I care most about, having grown up with them. I don't know that there's a future, though, in owning consoles the way we own them now. I feel like we're eventually going to hit a point where people are going to want more crossover and compatibility. Like the idea that we're going to get Microsoft games on the Switch, supposedly, is huge, because that's the only console I don't own. I own a PS4 and a Switch. I don't have an Xbox One. So
Neither do I.
And so if I can start buying Xbox One games ported to the Switch, that would be kind of humongous and allow me to not need to buy that last console ever.
Right. And while the upside of having a console for gaming is the fact that no matter what, when a game comes out for that console, you know it will work, and it has been, for lack of a better term, optimized for that console.
Right.
Versus, all right, we're going to stream from here, and we've got to make it work on everybody's computer, everybody's system. It's Windows, it's Mac, it's Linux, it's, who's running Windows 3.1? Well, make it work on Windows 3.1. One of the nice things about something like Steam is also there is minimum requirements, and whatever hoops you need to jump through to get it to work on your computer, once you do, it's working. But if this is sort of a platform agnostic logging onto Google, you are going to run into so many weird corner cases. And that is one of the great frustrations I've always had in gaming on the PC. Given that I grew up playing on the Mac, I'm very familiar with the, wow, what an amazing game. I'd sure love to be able to play it. And to then just turn to a console and go, well, I put it in, it's going to work.
Right, of course. I mean, things are a little different now, but yeah.
A little.
The idea also, I think, is, Steam is trying to unify a lot of that, and so is Origin and Epic Games Store. And like the fact that we have now, Steam is not the only publisher on PC. We have Origin and Epic Games as well. There's going to be competition there. And like for me, I just want to be able to play games. And if like none of those services are perfect, Steam is,
of course,
my favorite because I've had it the longest, I think. But even that has its issues. But like Origin is not intuitive. The Epic Games Store is more intuitive, but still not that intuitive. I just, there was a time where you didn't have any of that. You just had to go to a store, buy a game, and put the disc in the system, like you were talking about.
Right.
And I just think that, where Google's headed with their console, there is such a small margin of error for greatness and failure, because they're creating a tenuous relationship that there's no standard for in the industry right now.
Yeah, and I mean, one of the things that I definitely worry about is preservation. As new games come out and new games are made, one of the nice things about having to go out to the store and get the game was I now have the game. And as an example, as my computer rig, my Mac, whatever, as things update, as new systems, as whatever else, I continually have to refigure out how to get Diablo 2 working on my Mac. And fortunately, I have a physical copy of both Diablo 2 and Lord of Destruction, so that when all of a sudden it doesn't work and I need to re-download it, I don't need to necessarily go onto the Blizzard site and go like, no, I did buy this. Oh, you don't have that recognition. I guess I need to give you another $15 for all of this. No, I have the discs. I can make the installers work, and I can update it and make that happen.
Yeah, I mean, the good thing about, at least with Battle.net and Blizzard, is I believe there's a way to register it if you have the discs. Like, it's not easy to find, but because like I own StarCraft 2 or StarCraft 1 rather, and when they were releasing the remastered version, I was like, I don't want that. I'll play my original one, and there was a way to like register your original disc if you had all the nonsense. But yeah, I think that On the plus side, though, with something like this Stadia is that gaming consoles eventually become obsolete. And like, but then again, as we're talking about these multimedia boxes, will they be as likely to become obsolete? Like, I got
Probably.
rid of my I got rid of my 360 because I didn't play any of the games on it. I ended up rebuying a lot of them on the PC because it was more convenient. But the PS4 and the Switch can do more than the 360 could. So would I be more likely to hold on to the PS4 just as a Blu-ray player, since I have a dozen Blu-rays, which I might, and then in which case I would keep the games as well, and I worry about that too. Like, as I keep buying stuff on the Switch, which I love my Switch, I talk about it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I'm fearing the next rollover of consoles. Now the Switch is only a couple of years old, so we've still probably got at least another 5 to 8 years with it on an optimist's side,
Hopefully, yeah.
But and because it's multi-purpose with being handheld as well, they do cater to their handheld consoles longer. The fact that they are still supporting the 3DS while the Switch is out.
Right.
But I'm still afraid that it being a multimedia device is not going to be enough for it to stay relevant and them to move on to the next thing.
Yeah, who knows, especially with the tablet market being what it is, and we are definitely at a bit of a precipice as far as interactivity, of integration of digital versus physical, of DRM versus renting the idea. There's a lot of directions things can go.
Well, and also like VR making its big push with the Oculus and now the PlayStation VR, which is less expensive than the Oculus, and the Oculus is now actually working on a cheaper version. It's taking gaming into VR space in a way that seems more feasible. And what does that mean for the multimedia devices? Like, I know on the PSVR, because I watched a video about it, you can play non-VR games or watch TV using the headset. And it's like you're wearing the TV screen. So if someone's utilizing the actual TV for something else, you can watch or play your games on the headset. Which in theory,
one of the reasons why the Switch is great too.
Right. And why people, even though it wasn't as good, why people like the Wii U is the split of multimedia. And I think that's really powerful and really interesting, and want more of the other consoles to go in that direction, because I think portability will always be the future of gaming. Not a lot of people agree. I mean, also it's hard to compete with Nintendo as far as portability is concerned. Sony learned that the hard way with both of their handheld systems, that both did okay, but not well.
Right. I mean, certainly when the PSP came out, Sony was very they thought they knew what people needed and wanted and what people were missing in their handheld experience. And then they realized that UMDs and releasing movies on those little tiny discs meant people had to rebuy those movies. And we weren't interested in doing that. People aren't interested in rebuying what they already have.
Most of the time.
Everybody has a few exceptions.
Sure. But I think also if the PSP had come out now and not then, and the movies were digital and not physical,
if essentially the PSP Go came out as the first thing and it came out now.
Yeah. Like, that would have been a bigger success. It's why the Vita did better, is because you could download games for, PlayStation Plus between the the Vita rather, and the system, and there was cross play, and so that made it do better.
Oh yeah. And the digital games are why it succeeded in spite of Sony.
Right. And I don't think it was a failure, but it definitely didn't do as well as any of the Nintendo handheld systems. But again, also that's because Nintendo's been doing that for so long. They know that space, and people expect it from them. It's the same kind of hardship that I imagine Google's going to face in the beginning with their multimedia box streaming gaming platform, is that they're new to the space and people are going to scoff. And, the price point's going to be a big contention. The idea of how much the service costs and how they split up the cost, all of this stuff is going to really affect its success. And while obviously it's going to be another multimedia box, I'm sure there are going to be apps for all of the the different streaming services. At the end of the day, will it live up to the legacy it's now building?
Right. I mean, to be fair, Apple TV has games on it, and ones that utilize and work with iPads and iPhones. And this is far from the first time this has happened.
Right.
This is not super groundbreaking. In some ways it is, and in some ways it isn't. It's groundbreaking in that it's the first time Google's doing it, and we'll see what they do.
Well, and also I think it's groundbreaking. Again, it goes back to the being able to click on a link to go to the game and play it. Like
further integration, yeah.
Right. That's a thing that doesn't exist right now, with the exception of on the Switch, if you see someone, with the limited access you have on your stupid friends list, which I'm still complaining about 2 years later, you can click on a friend and it'll say they're playing this. You don't have that game. Do you want to go to the store and buy it? Which is sort of the same thing, but you still have to make the purchase. You can't just try the game because your friend is playing it, which would be ideal. Sort of like the DS download and play, which was that.
Mm-hmm. And also because not every game has a demo. Many of them do nowadays. And because Blockbuster doesn't exist anymore.
Well, and also making a demo now is much easier. I think a lot of game developers, instead of, creating a separate demo, they just release an alpha version of the game with lots of things locked up and you only being able to play a portion.
Essentially, yeah.
Or for some of the game demos, they convert to the full release when you get the full release. I've noticed as well, which is interesting. Yeah,
It's a pretty cool thing.
Yeah, I don't really know. I'm just hesitant about Google because I think, like you said, we're headed for a pit. We cannot sustain the game industry as it is right now. I mean, think about the Activision layoffs, and it's so common, even though it's infuriating, it's so common to hear a studio went under or another studio laid off a ton of employees because of the instability in gaming as it is. And I feel like the new Google console is going to exacerbate that, not help it.
Agreed. Some of the paradigm needs to shift, and that's not the direction we need to be shifting it right now.
No, and I think, and I'm not against multimedia boxes, which is what this episode has mostly been about. I don't hate the idea that Sony has its own TV network and that it has the ability to download movies, or that the Switch has Hulu on it. I think all those things make sense. But
agreed.
I think that we're not thinking big enough picture to sustain gaming. I think that even think about the PlayStation Network and Xbox Live and Nintendo Online. The availability they give you to stream or download some of their games is good, but it's still not big enough picture. I feel like, I like being able to play classic Nintendo games on the Switch, but at the end of the day, it is a neat parlor trick. I don't go to the Switch for those Nintendo games.
Right.
But if Nintendo said that a year from now they are going to offer for, instead of $20 a year, $50 a year, and you get access to every Nintendo game ever made, you just have to download it, and you have a limit to how many you can download at a time, maybe, I'd be all over that.
Yeah.
But also the sustainability of something like that. What would something like that cost to make?
Agreed. And that's the thing. I feel like a lot of the issue of the industry right now is not necessarily in distribution. We have so many ways to get so many games, and some of them it's almost too easy to get certain games. A lot of it is on the development side. And I know distribution is how the developers make the money. But there are, I don't feel like the problem is it's too hard for us to get access to games. I feel like studios need to, there's way too many closers and mergers and buyouts where we're losing a lot of talent and people aren't certain of their job. And so fewer risks are being taken. So we end up with, big budget AAA kind of things that we end up having to I don't know, buy or fuck it. And so I don't know. It's not a landscape that I feel very good about. And I would rather there be more small studios that can take risks. And the digital marketplace allows people to be able to get that. And there are some fantastic indie titles that are out there now and still being made.
Yeah, I think, honestly, if there were an indie streaming service to just get access to all the indie games, I'd pay for that over anything else. The idea that I probably play more indie games than I play anything else. I mean, last year, my biggest hits, besides Spider-Man, were things like Curse of the Moon and Shovel Knight and these other indie games that
The Messenger.
The Messenger, yeah. Like, those games keep me way more enraptured. You know, right now on the Switch, I'm playing Final Fantasy IX, which I've mentioned several times. As far as I'm concerned, it's an indie title. Even though it's not, it's treated the same way on the Switch. It's not full price. It's, you know, a condensed experience. I'm looking for games, I think, more that are engaging for a shorter period of time that I can get through faster than games that are like 40-hour playthroughs, because I don't have the 40, 50, 60, 70 hours to devote to games like I used to.
And then that makes you gun shy about buying another full experience.
Well, and also because the idea that, like, I bought, for example, way back when I got The Witcher 3 as a gift, and I loved it, and I played a ton of it, but it was taking so long to get through it, and there were so many other games I wanted to play that I abandoned it. You know, I loved the new Kingdom Hearts. I know it has flaws, but I enjoyed it because I was able to get through it fast enough that I could go and play other things. It's insane how many games come out every year that I only play such a tiny fraction of. And AAA titles become less and less important to me because I can't really get through them. And I don't want to buy a game for $60 that I play for 3 hours and abandon. It just doesn't feel good.
And having access to a streaming service where you're going to get these games, you kind of end up with, you're sort of fucked for choice.
Right.
Because anytime I or friends have loaded up an emulator and it's like, I've got every single Sega Genesis game that ever came out. Well, which one do we play? And you end up playing 30 seconds of 24 games rather than picking a game you really like and diving into it. The fact that you've bought that game means you feel a little beholden to playing it, as well as the fact of this is a game that I am voting for with my money, and I'm going to put as much of myself into it as I can, as opposed to here are all of the new titles. They are all equally as expensive because you've paid for the streaming service. Now what do you do?
Well, yeah, and you have to worry about the developers too. Like, where's their cut if people are just streaming their games and not spending the money on it?
Yeah, are they getting undercut so that the Google's platform gets subscribers?
Yeah, I mean, there's got to be some kind of licensing fee, I'm guessing, but
I'd hope.
It just, yeah, it's why I stopped buying used games. I used to buy used games all the time because they were cheaper, but when it occurred to me how ripped off the developers were getting, I was like, oh, well, I want to support those developers. I'll just buy the games directly. And odds are most of the time some of the digital games are on sale or have sales going more frequently, whereas the physical stores don't often. And so that's made it a lot easier to make that choice too. But yeah. I just don't know that if I had access, like I joked about wanting access to every Nintendo game ever, mostly because I just want to play Chrono Trigger again on my Switch. But the idea that having access to all that stuff, like that's probably why I don't play the Nintendo games as much as I would like to on the Switches online, is because I open it up and there are 30 games or whatever it is, and I look at them all and go, oh, these are awesome, and then I don't do anything.
Yeah, it's like, oh, it's so nice to see them there. Cool. And you don't pick one and you don't play it. I've been playing Adventures of Lolo on it.
Nice.
Because that is a game that I have never played. And I have a bunch of old Nintendo Power strategy guides. And one of them that I grew up with was top secret codes or top secret passwords. I can see the cover, but I can't remember exactly the title. And it has a whole section of passwords, a section of cheat codes, and then like a whole index of them. And it was for Nintendo, Super Nintendo, and Game Boy. And it had passwords for all 3 Adventures of Lolo games for the NES. And I was like, these look really cool. What a neat little puzzle game. Never found it in the wild and never found it at a price that I was like, all right, let me get this at this used video game store to try it out. But now I can play it. And that was I'm very fortunate that there was one game that I looked at and went, that one, I'm playing that one. And I'm not great at the game, but it's a delightful puzzle game that I'm having a lot of fun with.
Side note, you mentioned delightful puzzle game, and this is not apropos of anything, but Baba Is You finally came out, and I've heard that it is an incredible puzzle game. It's on the Switch.
I would really like to play Baba Is You, yes.
I've heard some really great things about it. But yeah, no, I think that games as a service is not a bad idea at its core, but like I feel overwhelmed by media in general these days. Like it's to the point where the reason I watch mostly on YouTube is because I can go to my subscription page and it shows all the new individual episodes of the subscribed channels I like, what came out. Whereas like when I go on Netflix or Hulu or Amazon right now, unless it's a show I'm actively currently watching, I look at my options and go, no, I don't want to watch any of this because I can't decide. You know,
yeah.
I'm still in the middle of Riverdale. I still haven't finished half of the Netflix shows at this point, the Marvel Netflix shows. And it's like, it's because I look at how much there is and just get overwhelmed. And that's kind of what I'm afraid of at the end of the day with media boxes in general. But for sure with the Stadia is this idea that if I can play any game I want, well, I don't know what game I want to play. You know?
It throws off prioritization, which I already have enough trouble with.
Yeah, I when it comes to sticking to one game, it's really tough as it is. There are tons of games I haven't finished, and I'm trying to get through Final Fantasy IX before I move on to anything else. Because I know the minute I put it down, I'm not going to go back to it for a while. And I just think that something like this, and multimedia boxes in general, while I like the idea of being able to do multiple things on a gaming system besides just play games, I also, the lack of focus allows me to wander, and then sometimes I don't do anything.
Yeah. Just because the features sound nice and we want the features, do we really want the features?
Yeah. It's going to be an interesting, I think, 2 or 3 years for gaming to see how this stuff plays out.
Agreed.
But, you know, at the end of the day, I think that it's also... You know, I'm also really excited. I don't want to be completely Debbie Downer on this. I think that we have potential to do really great stuff in gaming and finally grow this beyond a hobby, viewed as a hobbyist resource, and that it's more than that.
Yes.
But there is a lot of realism of a crash coming again, you know, like the crash in the 80s. And I don't think anyone in the industry is really, like, they're ignoring it and just continuing to push out content.
But I would love to be proven wrong on this.
Me too.
And that would be so nice. But it's, I don't know. It's a matter of trying to appeal to everybody in a very strange way. I mean, it's a huge market share. And there's a lot of pulling back and forth on this. And you know what? I suppose, Matt, you and I are a little more gaming focused as far as our devices go.
True.
But that's not everybody. So we would love to hear from all of you. What do you use your game consoles for? Are they mostly for gaming? Are they mostly for watching? Is there a mix therein? Who in your household uses it and for what? I mean, we're not collecting data. We're just some nerds with a podcast, but it's nice to hear. We're sharing our experiences and we like hearing yours.
Yeah, I'm always curious what people use their consoles for. And like I am someone who actively games all the time, whereas my spouse, if there's a game she really wants to play, she dives in and will play for weeks, and then she might not look at the PS4 for months. And that's not abnormal in the current gaming landscape either, you know. And so I'm just curious, listeners, how you view your consoles or your PC and how you interact with all this stuff. You know, I have an idea of how some of you do because we talk online, but I'd really love to know, do you want multimedia boxes that expand what that means? Or do you want a system that plays damn games and nothing else? Let us know, please.
Yeah, this is a conversation. Thank you for being a part of it. I'm Geoff Moonen.
And I'm Matt, a.k.a. Stormageddon.
And happy gaming.